Homeless boy returned a biker vest. From a storm drain, by dawn, 312. Harleys lined his street. The storm didn't just rain, it hunted. It shoved water down the street so hard the gutters sounded alive, like something breathing under the concrete. Under the highway overpass, 13-year-old Caden hugged a pillar and watched the curb line rise toward his shoes. Before we continue, tell us in the comments where you are watching this from. Because nights like this look the same everywhere. Empty streets, hard wind, and the feeling that the city forgot you. Caden knew how to survive forgotten places. He kept his hood low, his hands in his sleeves, his eyes moving even when his body was still. The overpass was usually safe enough. Thick beams overhead, a broken street lamp that blinked light every few seconds, and a strip of high ground that normally stayed above the flood. Normally. Water slapped the underside of the bridge with a hollow boom. Rain hit sideways and tasted like metal and exhaust. A cardboard box spun in the gutter, caught, freed itself, and vanished around the corner like it got pulled under. Caden kept staring at the storm drain beside the curb. In daylight, drains meant coins and bottle caps and sometimes a lost glove. In storms, they meant the opposite of daylight. A warning hiss rose through the grate. The pavement trembled, not from traffic but from pressure. The gutter swelled, swallowing leaves, plastic cups, and a snapped tree branch. The current climbed fast, the way panic climbs, quiet at first, then all at once. Then the grate rattled like teeth. Caden shifted back, spine scraping concrete, as the rectangular cover lifted on one side. For half a second, it looked like it might settle back into place. It didn't. With a sharp snap, the grate popped free, flipped, struck the curb, and clattered into the road. Brown floodwater exploded out of the opening like a punch thrown from below. Trash followed. Twisted newspaper, a crushed can, something that looked like a kid's sneaker. And then something heavier rose in the spray. Leather. It slapped against the curb and rolled, half submerged, too thick to be a shoe, too big to be a bag. Caden stepped forward without deciding to. The cold water grabbed his ankles. He reached down, caught wet leather, and yanked. A biker vest came up, soaked and heavy, dragging water like it was alive. Caden stumbled back under the overpass, clutching it to his chest. Lightning flashed. For a breath of white light, he saw the patches, a skull, wings, bold lettering arched across the back. Not a brand, a club. Caden didn't know clubs the way adults did, with politics and histories. He knew them the way the street knew them, by the sudden quiet people got when engines rolled through in a pack, by the way even loud men found reasons to look away. He flipped the vest over. A name tab sat above the right pocket, stitched in clean block letters. A person's name. Caden's throat tightened. The smart move was to drop it, back away, and let the storm swallow it again. The smarter move was to never touch it in the first place. His hands didn't let go. Because Caden had another rule, the one that mattered more than smart. The street kept score. If you took what wasn't yours, it came back around. And it never came back small. Headlights cut through the rain. At first, they were just a smear of light on wet asphalt. Then they sharpened. Two low beams slowing near the intersection, crawling like the driver was searching, not lost, but placed. Caden pressed deeper into shadow, heart thudding against the leather. The vest was too bulky to hide. He tried anyway, folding it under his jacket like that could make it disappear. The headlights swept past the flipped storm grate, paused, then aimed straight at the mouth of the drain still vomiting water. The vehicle stopped. A door opened. A silhouette stepped out into the storm, broad shoulders, hood or cap pulled low, body angled against the wind. The person didn't wander. They walked straight to the drain with the confidence of someone who expected something to be there. Caden's lungs locked. The silhouette leaned over, reached into the rushing water with a gloved hand, and fished fast. One sweep, two, three. Then a sharp, angry motion, like they'd found nothing and didn't like the answer. The head snapped up. Even from 50 feet away, Caden felt it, the shift from searching to hunting. The silhouette turned slightly, scanning the shadows under the overpass. Caden moved first. He slid behind the pillar, keeping concrete between himself and the beams. He watched the light crawl, waited for it to drift, then crossed a strip of darkness low and quick, shoes splashing through a shallow pool. Leather thumped against his ribs. Behind him, the silhouette said something, Hard, short, a voice used to being obeyed. Caden didn't answer. He cut down the embankment to the service road, boots sliding on mud, catching himself with a hand on a cold rail. Water chased him in sheets, soaking his jeans, turning them heavy. He ran between parked cars and stayed where the streetlights died. Rain stung his eyes. The vest dragged at his arms. The thought hit him like a shove. If they caught him with it, he was done. If they caught him without it and decided he'd seen too much, he was still done. So he held on. At the corner, Caden pressed himself into a brick wall and peered back. The headlights were still near the drain. The silhouette was by the vehicle now, talking into a phone or to someone inside. The beams swept once more, slow and patient, checking the underside of the overpass like the driver believed the storm couldn't hide a kid forever. Then the vehicle rolled away. Not fast, not panicked, just certain. Caden stayed still until the taillights blurred into the rain. Only then did he look down at what he'd grabbed. The patches gleamed dark. The name tab sat there like a label on a mistake. Caden ran his thumb over the stitching and felt how careful it was, how permanent. "I'm not keeping you," he whispered, voice shaking from cold and adrenaline. "I swear." But promises didn't solve problems. Returning it would put him in front of men everyone avoided. Keeping it would put him on the wrong side of the kind of people who came out in storms, looking for what the water stole. Caden pulled the vest tighter under his jacket and started walking, forcing his feet forward through rising puddles toward the only place he'd ever seen bikes lined up outside at all hours. Each step felt like he was walking into a cold spotlight. For a second, he just stood there, listening. The engines behind the walls rumbled like distant thunder. His stomach tightened the way it did before fights he couldn't win. He didn't know if opening that door would save him or mark him. He only knew walking away would make the score worse. The city at 4 a.m. was a different animal. Storefronts were dark. Traffic lights changed colors for nobody. Water poured off roofs in steady curtains, and every drain he passed gurgled like it was choking. Caden kept to the edges, where doorways cut the wind and cameras didn't catch him clean. A police cruiser crawled along the main road, tires hissing through floodwater. The officer inside never looked toward the sidewalk. Caden wasn't sure if that meant he was safe or invisible. His arms ached. The leather went icy through his jacket. With every lightning flash, the patch burned into his eyes. Wings spread wide, skull grinning like it knew something he didn't. He tried to picture an easy solution. Leave it somewhere. Toss it. Pretend the storm never handed it to him. Each idea died the same way. Someone was already searching, and Caden had already been close enough to that drain to be a problem. The industrial strip showed up as the sky thinned from black to bruised gray. The air smelled like oil and wet metal. Buildings sat farther apart here, squat and quiet. Then he heard it. Engines in the distance, low and steady, not one, several, idling. The garage came into view at the end of the block, a wide metal building with roll-up doors and a faded sign half lit by a single lamp. Under the awning, motorcycles lined up in a row, chrome beating with rain. In the dim light, they looked like animals waiting, perfectly still. Caden stopped across the street, watching light leak from a side door. Someone moved inside. The place wasn't asleep. He looked down at the name tab again. A name meant a person. A person meant someone was missing a piece of themselves tonight. Caden didn't have much, but he knew what it felt like to lose the only thing that was yours. He crossed the flooded street, water seeping into his shoes, and stepped under the awning. Drips fell from the vest onto the concrete. Caden raised his hand toward the side door. He knocked once, firm, like he meant it. The door didn't swing open like a normal door. It cracked, just enough for a sliver of warm light to cut across Caden's face, and just enough for one eye to appear in the gap, sharp, suspicious, awake. For a long second, nobody spoke. The rain ticked on the awning. Water dripped off the biker vest inside Caden's jacket and splattered on the concrete at his feet. The eye dropped to Caden's hands, then the door opened wider. A man filled the frame. Late 40s, thick neck, gray in his beard, forearms corded like rope. He wore a plain work shirt, no colors. But Caden didn't need patches to know what he was. The man's stance said it, like he was used to doors meaning trouble. "What do you want, kid?" the man asked. Caden swallowed. His throat felt scraped raw from the cold. I found something," he managed, "in the storm drain." The man's gaze flicked to the street, then back to Caden. Not curious, calculating. "Yeah?" he said, flat. "And you came here because—" Caden's fingers tightened around the leather under his jacket. He forced himself to pull it out. The vest looked almost black in the weak light, heavy with water, patches dark and slick. The second it cleared Caden's jacket, the man's face changed. Not surprise, not anger, recognition, like he'd just seen a ghost step out of the rain. The man's hand shot out and caught the vest by the shoulder before Caden could rethink anything. He jerked it closer to the light, eyes scanning the back patch, then snapping to the name tab above the pocket. His jaw set so hard it made his cheek twitch. "Jesus," he said under his breath. Behind him, deeper in the building, engines idled. A wrench clinked. Voices stopped mid-sentence. The man didn't step aside, not fully, but he angled his body just enough. "Inside," he said. Caden hesitated on the threshold. Warm air hit his face, thick with oil and metal and damp leather. The garage was brighter than the street, but still shadowed at the edges, lit by long fluorescent strips that hummed. Bikes lined up like they were waiting for orders, tool chests, spare tires, a workbench covered in parts, and men. They were everywhere without being crowded, spread out the way predators spread, not in a pack, but in positions. A few looked up from what they were doing. A few didn't move at all. The door shut behind Caden with a heavy click that sounded final. The man who'd opened it grabbed a rag off a hook and wiped rain off the vest without looking away from it. Then he walked it toward the center of the garage as if carrying something that could explode. "Prez!" he called. A man stepped forward from near the back. Not the biggest in the room, but the room moved around him like gravity. 60s maybe, silver hair pulled back, face cut with old scars that didn't look like accidents. He wore a dark hoodie, sleeves pushed up, no patches either. But his eyes were the same kind of awake as the man at the door, like sleep was a luxury he didn't trust. He stopped in front of Caden and the vest. Caden tried to speak first, tried to control the moment. "I didn't steal it," he blurted. "I swear, the storm—" The older man raised a hand. Not aggressive, just enough to stop the words. He took the vest from the other man and turned it over slowly, studying it. His fingers traced the stitching like he was reading something only he could see. Then he looked at Caden. "Where?" he said, voice quiet but heavy. "Did you get this?" Caden opened his mouth. No sound came out. He forced it. "Overpass on Klein. Storm drain popped. Flood pushed it out." The older man didn't blink. He didn't react like a person hearing a lucky story. He reacted like a person hearing the worst confirmation. A man to the left, tall, shaved head, arms tattooed to the wrists, shifted his weight. "Klein's nowhere near our route," the tall man said. "That's industrial runoff. Ain't nobody dropping colors down there unless they want 'em gone." Another biker, younger, lean, with tired eyes, stepped closer and looked Caden over like he was checking for lies. Caden felt his skin crawl, not because they looked scary, because they looked experienced. The older man, Prez, set the vest on a table under the brightest light. Water pooled beneath it. He didn't take his eyes off Caden. "You got a name?" he asked. Caden's first instinct was to lie. Names got taken, names got written down, names got used. He said the safest version of the truth. "K." The lean biker's mouth twitched like he didn't buy it. Prez nodded once like he'd heard worse. "You hungry, K?" The question hit Caden sideways. He'd been bracing for a slap, a shove, a shout. Not that. He didn't answer fast enough. His stomach answered for him, a low, betraying noise. Somebody in the room snorted softly. The man who'd opened the door, thick neck, gray beard, moved toward a small office area and came back with a bottle of water and a wrapped sandwich like he'd done it 100 times. He shoved them into Caden's hands. "Eat," he said, rough, "then talk." Caden stared at the sandwich like it might disappear if he blinked. He unwrapped it with shaking fingers and took a bite. The bread was cheap. The meat was plain. It was the best thing he'd tasted in days. While he ate, the room stayed quiet in a way that made every sound louder. The rain on the roof, the hum of lights, the slow drip of water off the vest. Prez leaned closer to the table and lifted the vest just enough to see the inside lining. His fingers paused at a seam near the shoulder blade. Caden saw it too now that he was looking. The stitching on that section wasn't as old. It was newer, tighter. like somebody had opened the lining and closed it again. The tall biker noticed the same thing. His eyes hardened. "Who had this last?" he asked Prez. Prez didn't answer. He looked at the gray-bearded man. "Bishop," Prez said. It wasn't a question. Bishop's face tightened. He didn't look at Caden. He looked past him, through the walls, like the storm outside was trying to talk. "He left after midnight," Bishop said. "Said he had something to handle, wouldn't take backup." The tall biker slammed a palm on the bench hard enough to rattle tools. "Damn it." Caden swallowed another bite. He wished he could swallow the whole room with it, vanish the way he usually did. He stared at the floor and kept his voice steady. "I didn't know whose it was," he said. I saw somebody looking for it. A car, not a cop. They got out and checked the drain. They were mad." That got attention. Bishop's eyes snapped to him. "What kind of car?" "Dark," Caden said. "SUV. The headlights were low. It stopped right by the drain like they knew where to look." The lean biker stepped closer. "Did you see plates?" Caden hesitated. He had. A partial. 2 numbers. A letter. Not enough to matter unless you were somebody who could make it matter. "I saw some," he said carefully. "Not all. It was raining." Prez held up a hand again, a silent signal. The men around him shifted back half a step like they were giving the air room to breathe. Prez's gaze stayed on Caden, steady as a vice. "You didn't take anything out of it," he said. Again, not a question, a test. Caden shook his head fast. "No, I didn't even open. I didn't." His voice cracked on the last word. He hated that it did. He forced it back under control. "I brought it here," he said. "That's it." Bishop watched him for a second longer than anyone else. Then he turned his head toward a security monitor mounted near the office. A grainy black and white feed showed the street outside the garage, rain streaking the lens. At first, there was nothing but water and empty road. Then, headlights appeared at the edge of the frame. An SUV rolled into view, slow as a predator, stopping across the street from the garage. It didn't park in front. It parked just far enough away to look accidental. The wipers moved once, then stopped. The vehicle sat there, engine running. Caden felt his mouth go dry. He didn't know why. He just knew that feeling. The feeling of being looked at even when you couldn't see the eyes. The lean biker moved toward the window, careful not to silhouette himself. He peered through a crack in the blinds. "They're just sitting," he murmured. Bishop's fist closed around a socket wrench like it was the most natural thing in the world. Prez didn't look at the screen. He looked at Caden, and the warmth from earlier was gone. Not replaced by cruelty, replaced by understanding. "You weren't the only one who found that vest," Prez said quietly. "You were just the first one who brought it back." Caden's chest tightened. "I can leave," he said, too fast. "I don't want trouble. I'll go." "I won't say nothing. I don't—" Prez shook his head once. "Kid," he said, low, "you already said enough just by walking in here." Bishop's eyes stayed on the security feed. The SUV's driver door opened. A man stepped out into the rain, not running, not hiding, walking straight toward the garage like he owned the street. Bishop's voice dropped to a growl. "Lock it," and the side door handle began to turn. The handle turned again, slow, testing. Metal clicked. Whoever was outside tried the latch like they expected it to give. Bishop moved fast, crossing the garage in 3 strides. He slammed a deadbolt into place, then slid a heavy floor bar into the brackets. The kind meant for hurricanes, not people. "No one opens that door," he said. On the security monitor, the man in the rain stood close to the entrance now, head angled like he could hear through steel. He raised a fist and knocked, 3 firm hits, not frantic, not polite. Command knocks. Caden's body went tight. His mind tried to put distance between him and those knocks, but his skin didn't listen. He'd heard that kind of knock before, on abandoned buildings, on back doors, on a shelter office after hours. A knock that wasn't asking. Prez didn't flinch. He just turned slightly, placing himself between Caden and the door without making a show of it. Bishop leaned toward the blinds, careful, eyes narrowed to slits. "He's got his hood up," he muttered, face down, hands empty. The lean biker, his name had been murmured as Jack's by someone near the bench, stayed on the far side of the room, watching the roll-up doors and the windows like he expected trouble to come from everywhere at once. Caden couldn't stop staring at the vest on the table. Water still dripped off it in a steady rhythm, each drop hitting the metal with a tiny ping. He wanted to reach out and pull it back into his jacket like that could undo the past 10 minutes. The knocking came again, then a voice, muffled through the door. "Hey, maintenance, city crew, that drain popped, we're checking the block." Bishop's eyes flicked to Prez, and Caden saw the exact moment every man in that room decided the same thing. Liar. The voice outside was too calm, too controlled. Nobody doing storm drain cleanup at 4 in the morning walked up to a biker garage and sounded like they were reading off a script. Prez stepped toward the side door, not close enough to be seen through the small wired glass window. He spoke loud enough to carry. "City crew comes in marked trucks," Prez called. "Not a black SUV. Keep walking." Silence. Then the voice shifted, a half step sharper, irritation showing through the mask. "You got a kid in there. He took something from a drain. That's city property. We need him to answer questions." Caden's stomach dropped. The words hit him like cold water. They know. He hadn't told them his name. Not really. He hadn't told them where he slept. He hadn't told them anything that should lead a stranger straight to this door. And still, they knew there was a kid inside. Bishop's jaw tightened. Jax's head snapped up, eyes hard. Prez didn't raise his voice. "No kid here. Wrong building." Outside, the man exhaled loudly, like he'd just run out of patience. "Don't make this harder than it has to be." That sentence made Caden's hands start to shake again. It wasn't a threat screamed. It was worse, a promise spoken like paperwork. Bishop turned away from the door and went straight back to the table. He grabbed the vest, flipped it inside out, and ran his fingers along the seam Prez had noticed. He didn't look like a man checking a jacket. He looked like a man defusing a bomb. "Knife," Bishop said. Someone slid a small blade across the table. Bishop didn't stab. He didn't slash. He worked the stitching carefully, just enough to open a clean line without tearing the leather. Caden watched like he couldn't blink. The room closed in around the table, but nobody crowded. They gave Bishop space. This was delicate. Bishop hooked 2 fingers into the opening and pulled. Something dark and rectangular slid out with the wet lining. A flash drive. It landed on the metal with a dull tap. For a heartbeat, nobody moved. The garage felt suddenly too quiet, like the storm outside had paused to listen. Then, Bishop reached back into the lining and pulled again. A folded scrap of paper, sealed in plastic. It was damp around the edges, but the ink held. Prez didn't snatch it. He opened it slow, reading with his eyes first, not his hands. Caden couldn't see the words from where he stood, but he saw what they did to Prez's face. The older man's mouth tightened. His eyes went distant, not lost, just forced somewhere else by what was written. Bishop swallowed hard. That's a date." Jax leaned in, voice low. "And coordinates. That's what that looks like." Prez didn't answer. He folded the paper back up with fingers that were suddenly very steady. Outside, the voice returned, closer to the glass now. "Caden." Caden's blood went ice. His knees almost buckled, not from weakness, from the shock of being called something he hadn't given away. He grabbed the edge of the workbench to stay upright. Bishop's head snapped toward him. "That's your name?" Caden didn't want to speak, didn't want to confirm anything. But lying to these men felt like lying to the only roof he'd had in months. He nodded once. Barely. "Who knows that?" Bishop demanded. Caden's throat worked. I don't know." The man outside knocked again, harder this time. The wired glass rattled in its frame. "Caden," the voice said, louder. "Open the door. It's safer if you come out now." Safer. Caden knew that word the way you knew a con artist's smile. It meant the opposite. Prez's gaze stayed on Caden, and the look wasn't anger. It was something closer to responsibility, like Caden's existence had just become part of the room whether anyone wanted it or not. "You got family?" Prez asked. Caden let out a sound that might have been a laugh if it didn't hurt. "No." "You got a caseworker?" Bishop asked, sharp. Caden hesitated. I used to. I don't go back." Jax's eyes softened for half a second, then hardened again when the voice outside spoke. "We can do this the easy way, or we can do this the official way." Bishop stepped toward the monitor and tilted it so Prez could see. The man outside shifted his weight, glancing down the street like he was checking timing, like he was waiting for something else to arrive. Bishop pointed. "Look at his left hand." Caden followed the gesture. The man's hand wasn't empty. It held something small, dark, and square. Not a gun, not a flashlight, a radio. He was talking to someone. Prez's voice dropped. "He's not alone." As if on cue, headlights appeared at the far end of the block on the security feed. Another vehicle, then another behind it. They didn't rush. They rolled slow, taking positions like chess pieces. Caden's chest got tight. "They're gonna—" He stopped. He didn't know what they were going to do. He only knew what it felt like when adults decided you were a problem to be managed. Bishop walked to a cabinet and yanked it open. Inside were first aid kits, bottled water, and a few folded blankets. He grabbed a thick hoodie and tossed it to Caden. "Put that on," Bishop said. Caden caught it clumsily. The hoodie was heavy, warm, and smelled like detergent. It felt like a different life. Bishop didn't stop moving. "Jax, kill the front lights, leave the back on, I want them guessing." Jax flicked a switch panel. Half the garage lights snapped off, plunging the front into shadow while keeping the work area lit enough to move. Prez held the paper and flash drive in one hand, now like they weighed nothing and everything at once. "Who's Bishop?" Caden blurted before he could stop himself. He meant the name Bishop had said earlier, the name connected to the vest. Bishop's face tightened again. "My brother," he said. "And that vest—" He stopped, jaw working. "That vest shouldn't be in a drain," Jax finished for him. Outside, the man raised his voice. "You got 2 minutes. After that, we come in." Bishop gave a low laugh that had no humor in it. "Come in how?" And then, like the universe wanted to answer, there was a sound from the back of the building, a soft, metallic scrape. Not the storm, not the rain, something touching the rear door. Jax turned his head sharply, eyes narrowing, and moved without a word. He crossed to the back entrance with a step so quiet Caden barely heard it. He pressed his ear to the metal. Another scrape. Slow, deliberate. Someone was working something back there. A lock, a chain, a tool. Caden's heart started hammering again, harder than before. Because the street didn't do polite distractions. The street did setups. Bishop reached into his pocket, pulled out his phone, and typed without looking at it. His thumb moved fast. His eyes stayed on Caden. "You said you saw plates," Bishop said quietly. "What did you see?" Caden blinked. His mind raced through rain and glare and fear. 2 and 7, he said, forcing himself. "I think. And maybe a K or an H. The rest, I don't know. It was moving." Bishop nodded, like that was more than enough. He turned the phone screen slightly so Prez could see what he'd typed, then sent it. "Who are you texting?" Caden asked. Bishop didn't look away from him. "People who owe me." The rear door scrape became a louder clack. Jack stepped back from the door, eyes hard. He lifted one hand, palm out, signaling silent. He mouthed one word. "Now." Prez moved like he'd decided something. "Caden," he said. It was the first time Prez used the full name like it mattered. "Listen to me. You came here to do the right thing. That's done. Now your job is to stay alive long enough for that to mean something." Caden's mouth went dry. I didn't mean, I know, Prez said. Bishop walked over, grabbed Caden's wrist. Not rough, not gentle, just certain. He pulled Caden toward the back office area where shelves blocked sightlines from any windows. "Stay behind that cabinet," Bishop ordered. "If anyone gets in, you don't run out front. You don't run out back. You stay where you are until I come for you. Understand?" Caden wanted to say yes. His throat wouldn't do it. He nodded hard. From the side door, the voice outside called again, sharp now. "Time's up." At the back door, metal screamed as something pried against it. The garage held its breath. Then, through the security feed, Caden saw the black SUV's driver step back from the side entrance. He lifted his radio. And at that exact moment, every motorcycle in the garage, dozens of them, came alive one after another as men hit ignitions in sequence, the sound rolling through the building like thunder being summoned on purpose. Caden flinched at the roar. Prez leaned close to Bishop and said something Caden couldn't hear over the engines. Bishop's hand tightened around the flash drive. The rear door frame flexed, a latch snapped, and the back door started to open. The back door finally gave with a violent snap, and cold rain air rushed into the garage. Two men slipped inside in cheap rain jackets with reflective strips, hoods up. One carried a pry bar, the other had white zip ties looped around his wrist. They froze at the wall of motorcycles, dozens of engines thundering at once, the concrete trembling under the sound. Jax hit the first man before he could think. Shoulder to chest, a hard drive that sent him skidding. Then Jax hooked a leg and dumped him flat. The zip ties scattered across the wet floor. The second man swung the pry bar. Bishop stepped in, caught the wrist, twisted, and the bar clanged away. Ridge, broad, quiet, appeared behind him and drove a knee into the man's thigh. The intruder folded with a grunt, hands up, suddenly cooperative. In less than 10 seconds, both men were on the ground with their wrists cinched tight. No shouting, no drama, just the brutal efficiency of people who hated surprises. "Who sent you?" Bishop snapped, hauling the second man half upright by his jacket. The intruder coughed and tried to play brave. "You don't want this," he rasped. "This is city business." Jax pressed his knee harder into the first man's back. "City business comes with marked trucks," he said, flat, "not pry bars." The second man's eyes flicked past Bishop's shoulder, one quick guilty glance toward the office area where Caden was hidden, like the intruder expected to see a kid there, like he already knew. Bishop caught the glance, and something cold slid into his expression. He shoved the man back down and stepped so his body blocked that line of sight. Caden stayed frozen behind the cabinet, nails digging into wood. His ears rang from the engines. His body wanted to bolt even though there was nowhere to go. Bishop patted the second man down and pulled a laminated badge from the jacket. City Services. The photo didn't match. The edges were too clean. Bishop tossed it onto the bench like a joke. Then he found a radio clipped under the rain jacket. He clicked it once. Static. Then a clear voice cut through, low and controlled. "Confirm the kid. Get him out. Don't let him walk." Caden's stomach dropped. He clamped his jaw shut to keep from making a sound. Bishop's eyes lifted to Prez. "They're coordinating?" Prez stood at the table, the vest still dripping beside the flash drive and the plastic-wrapped note. His face didn't change, but something in his eyes tightened like a door locking. Ridge dragged the back door mostly shut and jammed a wedge under it. Rain still hissed through the gap, but the opening was gone. Jax ripped a phone out of the first intruder's pocket, still sealed in a plastic bag. He tore it open and scrolled. A thread with an unsaved number sat at the top. "Get the drive. Get the kid. No lights, no sirens." Bishop searched the other man again and pulled out a key card. Faded barcode, blue letters in the corner, Belmont Pumping Station. Bishop didn't speak for a second. He just looked at the card like it had teeth. "The coordinates," he said. Prez unfolded the note enough for Bishop to see. Bishop pulled up a map on his phone, fingers moving fast. Belmont Pumping Station lit up on the screen in an ugly industrial pocket of the city, surrounded by concrete channels and chain link. Bishop's voice went low. "This is where drains converge. Klein runs right under it." Then he stared at the date written on the note, and his throat worked once. "It's today." The side door rattled. A hard knock, then another, not asking. A muffled voice pushed through the metal. "Open up!" Prez didn't step into the wired glass window. He stopped short and spoke calmly. "Badge number, name, and call it in on a recorded line." Silence. Then the voice came back, colder. "Detective Rourke, major crimes." Bishop's head snapped up like the name was a slap. Rourke's voice sharpened. "Hand the kid over. You can keep the vest. You can keep whatever you think you found. This isn't your war," Prez answered, steady. "It became my war when you tried to break into my building." "You're harboring a witness," Rourke said. "You don't understand what he stepped into." Bishop leaned toward Caden's hiding spot, voice tight but controlled. "Stay down." Then Bishop spoke to Prez without looking away from the door. "Rourke closed my brother's file." Prez's eyes flicked once to Bishop. "And now he wants a homeless kid delivered quiet." Outside, tires rolled slow through standing water. Through the security monitor, Caden caught a glimpse of headlights taking positions down the block like they were building a cage. Rourke's tone shifted like he'd lost patience with the conversation. "I'm counting." The fist hit the door again, rattling the hinges. Prez raised a hand. The engines dropped from roar to a low idle, a tense growl that filled the building without giving away movement. "Ridge," Prez said. "Take Caden through the passage, now." Caden blinked. Passage? Ridge was already moving. He reached Caden, touched his shoulder, firm, not rough, and guided him out from behind the cabinet. For one breath, Caden expected someone to grab him, to accuse him, to shove him back into the rain. Instead, men shifted to make space. Eyes tracked him, but hands stayed off, like there were rules here, even in chaos. As Caden passed the captives, the first intruder lifted his head and smiled at him, small, ugly, certain. Caden's stomach rolled. He kept walking. Ridge led him behind stacked tires to a narrow door that looked like storage. Ridge shoved it open, and a dark corridor appeared between buildings, smelling of dust and old oil. Behind them, Rourke's voice rose. "1, 2, Bishop shouted back through the side door, loud enough for the street to hear. "Get a warrant and a marked unit, detective." A heavy hit answered him. Something metal scraped like a tool meeting a lock. Ridge pushed Caden into the corridor. "No talking," Ridge muttered. "Just move." Caden squeezed through the tight passage, shoulders brushing both walls. Rain hammered above, but the corridor felt sealed off from the world, like the club had built an escape hatch for exactly this kind of night. Halfway down, Caden couldn't stop it. "What's Belmont?" Ridge didn't slow. "Stormwater control, where you can hide things that never come back up, unless a flood pries it open." They reached another door. Ridge keyed it fast and pulled Caden into a dim storage space filled with boxed parts and folded tarps. Ridge shut the door, then handed Caden a cheap prepaid phone still in plastic. "You keep this," Ridge said. "One number's saved. If anything goes sideways, you call once. If they grab you, you break it." Caden stared at the phone. Nobody gave him anything and assumed he'd still be alive tomorrow. From the other side of the wall came the dull boom of another impact, and then a short burst of angry voices. The side door was being worked now, either forced or officially opened. Caden's throat tightened. "Why are they after me?" Ridge didn't answer right away. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded photo, worn soft at the corners. A teen boy smiled from it, older than Caden, bright eyes, hair longer. On his wrist, a braided bracelet, red and black. Caden's breath caught. He knew that bracelet. He'd seen it on the ground behind the bus stop on Klein 2 weeks ago, half buried in grime, right before a city truck rolled up and older kids scattered like they'd been trained. Caden's voice came out thin. "I saw that bracelet on the pavement." Ridge's eyes sharpened, focus snapping hard onto Caden's face. "You sure?" Caden nodded fast. "Red and black, same braid. It was by the bench near the storm drain cover that's always loose." "What night?" Ridge asked. "Tuesday," Caden whispered, forcing his brain to grab the detail. "Rainy. Truck came late, like after midnight. City logo on the door, but the numbers were scraped. And there was a black SUV parked down the block, same kind that was at the drain tonight." Ridge's jaw tightened as if he was holding back a curse. "Plate?" Caden's mind flashed to glare on wet metal, to the way the SUV had paused like it owned the drain. "I caught pieces," he said. 2, 7, and a K or an H. That's all I got." Ridge nodded once, storing it. "And the truck?" "White," Caden said. "Newer, clean. Too clean for a city truck. The driver never got out, just watched, like he was waiting for someone to bring something to him." Caden swallowed, then forced out the part he'd been afraid to say in front of anyone. "There was a guy by the bus stop the last few nights. Shaved head, city jacket. He kept asking kids if they found anything in drains. $5 for a phone, 10 if it's still turned on. He was fishing. I didn't think—" The wall shuddered again with another hit, closer now, and dust sifted down from a shelf. Caden's voice dropped to a whisper anyway. "He called me Caden without me telling him." Ridge didn't waste the air on sympathy. He took Caden's words like coordinates in a fight, clean, sharp, immediate. He tapped his earpiece once. "Prez, you hearing this?" Static for a beat, then Prez's voice, low and controlled. "Go." Ridge looked Caden dead in the eyes, like he needed the truth to stay steady. "Kid's seen the SUV before. Same make, same posture. City truck too. Clean white, scraped numbers. Bracelet was near Klein bench by the loose drain cover. Tuesday, after midnight. SUV watching." Silence on the line. Not disbelief. Calculation. Then Bishop's voice cut in, colder than the rain outside. He called him Caden. That's not random. Ridge's eyes flicked to the steel storage door as another impact hit somewhere in the garage. The dust trembled on the shelves like it was scared too. Move him, Prez ordered. Now. Ridge turned Caden by the shoulders. This way. Caden's feet felt wrong under him, too slow, too loud. Ridge guided him between stacks of boxed parts to a narrow service ladder that climbed to a small mezzanine. The space up top was cramped and smelled like rubber and old cardboard. A roll-up attic hatch waited in the ceiling, square and dark. Ridge shoved it open. Cold air breathed down. You ever crawl through rafters? Ridge asked. Caden's mouth went dry. No. You will, Ridge said, and pulled him up like Caden weighed nothing. They slid into the ceiling space on their bellies. Wood beams, insulation, a strip of corrugated metal roof above them that crackled with rain. The noise outside faded, replaced by the close, muffled sounds of the garage. Boots shifting, voices snapping low commands, the deep vibration of motorcycles idling like they were holding their breath. Ridge crawled ahead, then paused and pointed through a gap between beams. Caden peered down. He saw the side door. A tool bit into the lock, not a key, not patience. Steel on steel, sparks flickering like angry fireflies in the dark. Men outside murmured to each other, short phrases clipped like they were trained. Then a voice he recognized immediately, calm as a knife. On my count. Detective Rourke. Caden's stomach clenched hard enough to hurt. Ridge's face didn't change, but his jaw flexed once. He kept moving, pulling Caden along the beamline until the gap disappeared behind them. They reached a ventilation duct cutout leading into the adjacent unit, an old parts store connected by shared ceiling space. Ridge shoved the duct panel aside and dropped into darkness. Caden followed, landing badly, knees stinging. Ridge caught his sleeve before he could fall into a shelf. Quiet, Ridge breathed. From the other unit, they slipped down a back stairwell that smelled of mildew and stale gasoline. At the bottom, a rear service door waited. Ridge cracked it open a finger width and looked out. Rain, alley, dumpster, empty. But empty in the way a room is empty right before someone walks in. Ridge nodded once and motioned Caden out. They moved fast down the alley, shoulders hunched, footsteps swallowed by puddles. Ridge led him to a plain van parked under a broken security light. No decals, no plates on the front. Ridge yanked the side door open and shoved Caden inside. Down, he hissed. Caden ducked onto the floor between toolboxes and a folded tarp. Ridge climbed in after him, shut the door, then punched into the front through a small window. Go, Ridge called. The van rocked as the engine turned over. At the same moment, the garage behind them erupted. Not gunfire, not screams, motorcycles. A roll-up door thundered open, and a wave of engines poured into the street like a controlled explosion. Harleys, one after another, lights cutting through rain, exhaust barking hard and low. They didn't scatter. They formed. 2 lines, then 3, then a tight pack that rolled out with purpose. Caden pressed his forehead to the van's interior metal, watching through a narrow crack in the door. He saw men in rain jackets step back from the garage entrance like they hadn't expected that many bikes. He saw Rourke himself, tall, dark coat, hood up, turn his head as the pack rolled past him like a wall. Rourke lifted his radio, and then everything moved at once. The black SUV that had been idling across the street surged forward like it was yanked by a rope. Another SUV pulled out behind it. The city truck's headlights snapped on down the block, rolling slow at first, then faster. But the bikes didn't run. They cut across the SUV's path, splitting the street like a blade. One biker swung wide and blocked the SUV's line. Another slipped behind it. The pack didn't touch the vehicles, didn't give anyone a clean reason to shoot or claim assault. They just took the road away from them. Ridge's voice came from the front of the van, steady, almost bored. Hold tight. The van reversed hard out of the alley, tires hissing on wet pavement. It shot into a side street just as one of the SUVs tried to break past the bikers. Caden felt the van pick up speed. The floor vibrated under him. Rain hammered the roof. He could still hear the bikes behind them, dozens of engines rising, then dropping, then rising again as they redirected the chase away from the alley. For a second, Caden thought it might work, that the pack was too big, too loud, too public to fight. Then the van's back end slid slightly as it turned. Ridge corrected fast, but Caden saw it anyway through the crack. headlights swinging onto them from the next street over, another SUV. It hadn't followed the bikes, it had waited ahead. Caden's throat tightened. The SUV accelerated, closing distance, its lights bright enough to bleach the wet road white. Ridge swore once under his breath. No panic, just anger. He hit the gas. The van shot forward, cutting between two parked cars so tight, Caden expected metal to scream. Water sprayed out in curtains from under the tires. The SUV stayed with them, steady, confident, like the driver was trained for this. Caden clutched the tarp to keep from sliding as the van took a hard right, then a hard left into a narrow lane behind a row of closed shops. The lane was barely wide enough for the van, and dumpsters crowded the edges. The SUV tried to follow and clipped a dumpster. Metal shrieked. The SUV slowed half a beat. Ridge used that half beat like it was gold. He punched through a gap between buildings and emerged onto a service road running along a drainage channel. To Caden's left, floodwater rushed in a concrete ditch like a river. To the right, chain-link fences and boarded doors. Ahead, a red light glowed at an intersection nobody was using. Ridge didn't slow. The van blew through the red, tires hydroplaning for one terrifying moment, then catching again. Caden's breath came in sharp, painful pulls. He risked a glance through the crack. The SUV still followed, closer now. It flashed its high beams once like a signal. Then, the SUV's passenger window lowered. Caden saw the arm extend, dark sleeve, gloved hand, and a gun. Caden's body went numb. His brain tried to float away from his skull, like it didn't want to be there for this. Ridge didn't swerve, didn't flinch. He did something else. He hit the brakes, not fully, just enough. The van decelerated hard for 1 second. The SUV surged forward, too fast, too close, momentum betraying it. Ridge snapped the wheel left. The van slid sideways, and the SUV shot past them by a yard, the gun arm jerking in surprise. The SUV fishtailed, tires losing grip on the wet road. Ridge punched the gas again and swung behind it, then cut right into a narrow underpass. The SUV tried to recover and follow, but its rear end snapped out again, and for a second, it skated toward the drainage channel. Caden held his breath, expecting the SUV to plunge into the rushing water. It didn't. It recovered at the last second, tires screaming, and rocketed after them. But now it was angry. Now it wasn't clean. Ridge's voice, calm through clenched teeth. "They're willing to shoot." Caden's hands shook so hard, his knuckles clicked against the floor. He whispered, barely audible, "I didn't do anything." Ridge glanced back through the interior mirror just once, then spoke like a promise. "You did one thing. You brought it back." They blasted out from under the overpass into a grid of older streets, tighter, darker, more turns. Ridge drove like he knew the city's bones. The SUV struggled to match the angles. Then, headlights appeared from the left, another vehicle cutting across. For a 6-second, Caden thought they were boxed in, but the new headlights belonged to a motorcycle, then another, then 3 more. Bikers. They came in low and fast, sliding into the intersection and taking it over, forcing the SUV to brake or hit them. They didn't give it a clean lane. They didn't give it speed. The SUV slowed just enough. Ridge took that opening and vanished down a side street lined with dead trees and shuttered houses. The bikes stayed behind, engines roaring like they were daring the SUV to push through. Caden's forehead pressed to the van wall again, not from curiosity now, but because he needed something solid to keep him from shaking apart. After 5 more turns, Ridge finally eased off the gas. The world outside looked different, residential, quiet, dark windows, a church on the corner with water pooling on its steps. Dawn hadn't arrived yet, but the sky had lightened from black to bruised purple. Ridge pulled into a narrow driveway beside a low brick building that looked abandoned, boarded windows, faded sign, weeds around the foundation. But the driveway was clear, and the door had a fresh padlock. Ridge killed the engine. Silence hit Caden like a wave. His ears rang without the roar of motors. The van door slid open, and cold air poured in. Ridge stepped out first, scanning both ends of the street. Then he reached inside and offered Caden a hand. Caden took it without thinking, fingers numb. They moved to the building's side entrance. Ridge knocked in a strange rhythm, too quick, one slow, too quick. The lock clicked. The door opened from inside, and warm air spilled out along with the smell of coffee. Prez stood there, No hoodie now, leather jacket, dry, like he'd teleported ahead of the chaos. Behind him, Bishop and Jax were already inside, wet but steady. Another biker Caden hadn't seen before sat at a table with a laptop open, power bank beside it, cables spread out like surgery tools. Prez looked Caden over once, quick and thorough, then nodded. "You good?" he asked. Caden tried to speak and felt his throat tighten. He settled for a small nod. Prez stepped aside. "Then you stay." Caden walked in and felt the door close behind him. The sound wasn't just a door shutting. It was the city getting locked out. Bishop set the vest on the table like it was evidence in a trial. Jax dropped the plastic-wrapped note beside it. The tech guy, Cal, plugged the flash drive into a small adapter and didn't smile, didn't joke, didn't waste time. "What did we catch?" Cal asked. Bishop's eyes met Prez's. "A pipeline, through drains, through a pumping station." Prez's jaw tightened. "And a kid they already know by name." Cal's fingers moved, opening files, running decryption tools like he'd done this before. Caden stood near the wall, hugging himself inside the borrowed hoodie. The warmth should have helped. It didn't. His mind kept replaying the gun arm out the SUV window, the calm voice saying safer if you come out now. Prez turned to him again, slower this time. "Caden," he said, "you told Ridge about a man offering cash for phones." Caden nodded. "Did he ever say a name?" Prez asked. Caden searched his memory, the way you search pockets when you're desperate. "No, but he had a ring, black, square, like—" Caden hesitated, trying to describe what he only half understood. "Like a badge, but not police, just heavy." Bishop's face went still. "Rourke wears one." Caden's stomach twisted. Cal's laptop beeped. Everyone in the room snapped their attention to the screen. Cal didn't look excited. He looked sick. He turned the laptop toward Prez and Bishop. "This is payments," he said. "Dates, locations, drain IDs, and—" He swallowed once. "Names." Bishop leaned in, eyes moving fast. Then he froze. Caden watched Bishop's shoulders lift like he'd been punched without being touched. Bishop's voice came out rough. "That's my brother." Prez's hand flattened on the table, steadying it, steadying himself. "Alive?" Cal scrolled, face tight. "There's a timestamp. Last week." Bishop's breath went shaky. "Where?" Cal clicked one more file and a photo loaded. Grainy, low light, a room with concrete walls, a metal door, a single cot on the floor. And in the corner of the photo, barely visible, was a red and black braided bracelet. Caden's knees went weak, because he knew that place without ever seeing it. He knew it by the smell that came off storm drains after rain, by the way certain trucks parked too clean on dirty streets, by the way kids learned to run when they heard a certain engine. Prez stared at the screen and didn't blink for a long time. Then he shut the laptop gently, like slamming it would make the truth worse. "Belmont," he said, "before daylight changes what they can hide." And for the first time all night, Caden realized the storm wasn't the thing that scared him most. In the brick building, nobody panicked. That scared Caden almost as much as the chase. Coffee poured, jackets went on, phones lit faces in brief flashes. The wet biker vest lay on the table like a body. Cal copied the flash drive twice, encrypted both copies, then pocketed the original. If they get one, they don't get all. His screen filled with columns, drain IDs, work orders, timestamps, payments. A city map blinked with points that weren't random. They were scheduled. "They're hiding in routine," Cal said. "Drain inspections, street cleaning windows, pump station access, places where a truck looks normal." Bishop leaned over Cal's shoulder, eyes burning. "Belmont." Cal zoomed out. Lines of dots narrowed into a single knot. Belmont pumping station. Klein ran straight into it. Prez tapped the table once. "We're not charging a pumping station. We're confirming what's there, then we decide how loud to get." Bishop's jaw flexed like he was holding his teeth together. "My brother's in one of those rooms." "And if we move wrong," Prez said, "they move him again, or they bury him." Caden swallowed. The word him hit like a weight. This wasn't about a vest anymore. It was about people who vanished and never came back. Ridge stepped forward. "They already know the kid. They called him by name." All eyes turned to Caden. Caden forced the truth out. "There's a man on Klein," he said. "City jacket. He offers cash for phones for anything you pull from drains. He watches kids, and the SUV. It's been there before. They don't guess, they track. Prez didn't argue. He just nodded once, decision landing. Ridge, take him back to his spot, get his things. I want to see what they touched and what they took. Caden's stomach tightened. Back there? Quick in, quick out, Ridge said. Then we disappear you. Caden didn't know how to trust that sentence, but he followed anyway. They drove in an older van that looked like it belonged in bad weather. The city was still wet, gray light bleeding into the clouds. When they passed the overpass, Caden saw fresh scrape marks around the storm drain like someone had worked it after the flood. Ridge noticed too. They came back. They always do, Caden whispered. The abandoned laundromat sat the same as always, boarded windows, peeled paint, but the quiet around it felt wrong. Caden's place was never quiet. Quiet meant someone had arrived first. Ridge parked half a block away and listened. Stay close. They approached from the side. Caden's chair leg wedge, gone. The side door stood slightly open. Caden stopped walking. Ridge slid in front of him. Behind me. Inside, the air hit Caden like a slap, sharp, chemical, not just damp and mold, something flammable. His corner was wrecked, blanket ripped, cardboard signs shredded, the tin where he kept coins, missing. Somebody had pulled the world apart like they were looking for a specific piece. Caden dropped to a knee and yanked his backpack from under a machine. It felt lighter. He unzipped it with shaking fingers. His notebook was gone, the one where he wrote plates, times, anything he could remember because memory didn't always survive hunger. His pencil was gone. A cheap phone he'd found weeks ago, still dead. Gone. They took my book, Caden said, voice small. Ridge scanned the wall above Caden's sleeping spot. A mark sat there in black paint, a filled-in square, stamped clean, like a signature. Caden's throat tightened. That's the ring. The heavy ring. Ridge's eyes went hard. Rourke. A soft scrape sounded deeper in the building. Ridge lifted a hand. Silent. Another scrape. Then a tiny click that made Caden's skin crawl. A lighter. From between two rows of washers, a man stepped out in a city jacket with the hood up. He held the lighter low, flame dancing. His other hand stayed in his pocket like it was on something else. He smiled at Caden like he was greeting a neighbor. You shouldn't have come back, the man said. Ridge didn't move closer. Put it down. The man tilted the lighter toward the floor. A puddle shimmered with a rainbow sheen. Gasoline. Caden's stomach flipped. The smell burned his nose now that he recognized it. The man's eyes slid to Caden. Hey, Caden, he said, gentle as a lie. You made this expensive. Ridge's grip closed on Caden's hoodie. Run. Caden's feet lagged a half second, just long enough. The man flicked the lighter. Flame jumped across the puddle in a thin line, then surged as it found more fuel. Heat slapped Caden's face. Smoke rolled up fast, thick and black. Ridge shoved Caden out the door into the drizzle and slammed it nearly shut to choke the oxygen. Not enough to stop the fire, enough to buy seconds. They sprinted down the alley. Caden's lungs burned. Behind them, something inside the laundromat popped loud, glass cracking, metal warping. They hit the street. The van was still there, but so was something else. A black SUV eased off the curb like it had been waiting for the show to start. Headlights bloomed bright. Ridge shoved Caden into the van, dove into the driver's seat, and gunned it. The tires hissed on wet pavement as they ripped away. Caden twisted to look back through the rear window. Smoke rose above the laundromat roof in a dark column, a signal you could see from blocks away. The SUV pulled out behind them, smooth and patient, closing distance. Ridge didn't raise his voice when he spoke into his earpiece. Prez. They tried to burn him out. They stole his notebook. We've got a tail. Static. Then Prez's answer, immediate and cold. Bring him, straight to Belmont. Ridge didn't try to outrun them in a straight line. He cut through back streets and service lanes, keeping the van where cameras were blind and turns were tight. The SUV stayed on them anyway, smooth, patient, like it already knew the route. Ahead, a white city truck rolled out and angled across a narrow service road, blocking it. Ridge didn't brake. He aimed straight at the truck, then snapped the wheel at the last heartbeat and slid the van through a gap so tight the mirror kissed metal and spat sparks into the rain. The SUV behind them hesitated just long enough. Ridge used that breath to kill the headlights and coast under a low rail bridge, stopping in shadow. Down, he he whispered. Caden flattened on the floor as the SUV crawled past the mouth of the street, headlights sweeping. It didn't see them under the bridge, but it didn't leave either. It stopped at the far end, idling, waiting for confirmation. Ridge pressed his earpiece. "Prez, tail's holding. They've got blockers." "Hold," Prez answered. "Watch for our lights." Ridge tossed Caden a sealed prepaid phone. "One number. If you get separated, call once. If they grab you, break it." Minutes later, a low thunder rolled in. Motorcycles. Headlights flooded the intersection behind the SUV. The tail's brake lights flared, boxed in by bikes taking lanes inches apart. No contact, no chaos, just control. Ridge started the van and slipped out the opposite side of the bridge, the roar of engines pulling the attention away like a net being thrown. They drove until the streets turned fenced and industrial again. Floodlights appeared ahead, bleaching the rain white. Belmont Pumping Station. The gate was half open. A white city truck waited inside. Another idled outside like it owned the curb. Ridge parked 2 blocks out behind storage units. The air tasted like wet rust and chemicals. Even from here, Caden could hear the steady hum of pumps working through the storm. A figure stepped from the dark beside them. Prez. He followed Caden's gaze toward the gate. A man in a dark coat stood talking to the truck driver, hand lifted as he gave instructions. Something black and square on his finger caught the floodlight. Caden's mouth went dry. "That's him," he whispered. "The ring." Bishop's voice came through Prez's earpiece, tight. "You got eyes on the gate?" Prez tapped his mic once. "Yeah, Rourke's here. 2 trucks, floodlights. They're running operations like it's routine." Ridge crouched lower behind the storage unit and pointed past the fence line. A second man walked the yard perimeter in a city jacket, scanning the shadows the way predators scan brush. Caden recognized the posture instantly, the same slow sweep he'd felt outside the garage. "They're looking for me," Caden whispered. "No," Prez said, eyes locked on the gate. "They're making sure nobody looks at them." At the entrance, Rourke lifted his radio, spoke once, and the inside truck started rolling. The gate began to close, chain rattling, metal groaning. Prez's hand rose, a silent command for everyone to hold position. Then the gate clanged shut. The gate slammed shut like a verdict. Through the chain link, Belmont Pumping Station looked ordinary if you wanted it to. Floodlights, a couple city trucks, a fenced yard, a low concrete building with vents and warning signs. The kind of place nobody stared at unless their car broke down in front of it. But Caden felt it in his teeth. The hum of the pumps wasn't just noise. It was a cover, a constant swallowing sound that could eat anything. Voices, footsteps, even a scream if you were far enough away. Prez crouched behind the storage unit and watched the yard like he was reading a map that moved. Ridge stayed low beside him, hand resting near his waistband, eyes scanning angles and blind spots. Caden hugged himself in the borrowed hoodie, shivering in the drizzle. He didn't want to look, but he couldn't stop. Every time the floodlights swept, he expected Rourke's face to turn toward the shadows and land on him. Instead, Rourke paced near the trucks, calm, in control, like the storm was his schedule. One of the city workers walked the fence line again, slow. He paused near a corner, took out a phone, and snapped a photo into the darkness, like he was documenting that nobody was there, not searching. Prez's jaw tightened. He tapped his mic once. "Cal, you got anything else on the drive? Anything about tonight?" Cal's voice came through, low and crackly. "Yeah, there's a schedule file. It lists drain inspections feeding into Belmont, and there's a note attached to today's window. It says, 'Move before dawn.'" Bishop's voice cut in right after. "They're relocating," Ridge whispered, barely moving his lips. "If they're moving people, we can't wait for paperwork." Prez didn't answer right away. He watched Rourke step to the gate control box, speak to the driver of the inside truck, and point toward the main building. The truck rolled toward a roll-up door at the building's side. As it approached, the roll-up door lifted just enough to swallow the truck's front end. Not the whole truck. Just far enough to keep what was inside hidden from the yard. Caden's stomach turned. "That's not maintenance," Caden whispered. "They're loading something." Prez's eyes flicked to him. "You ever been inside Belmont?" Caden shook his head fast. "No, but I've been near it. Kids don't go close. The air smells wrong." Ridge glanced at Prez. We need eyes inside. Prez's gaze hardened. We get eyes inside without starting a war. He shifted, raised his mic again. Jax. Jax's voice came back instantly like he'd been waiting for a word. Here. You and 2 others. West fence. Find me a way in that doesn't trigger cameras. No hero stuff. Copy. A minute later, movement flickered in the dark beyond the fence line, shadows moving low and deliberate through wet weeds and junked pallets. Caden couldn't see them clearly, but he could feel the presence. People who knew how to stay invisible. Prez leaned closer to Caden. Listen. If anything happens, you stay behind Ridge. You do not run toward the fence. You do not run toward the road. You do what you've been doing all your life. Make yourself small and hard to catch. Caden's throat tightened. What if they take me? Prez's eyes didn't soften. They sharpened. They won't. That was all he said. It landed heavy. Inside the yard, the perimeter man came back again. He stopped near the gate, spoke to Rourke, and handed him the phone. Rourke looked at the screen, then turned his head slowly. Not toward Caden, toward the storage units. Caden's blood went cold anyway. Rourke didn't stare. He just looked for 1 second too long, like he felt something off in the air. Then he spoke into his radio. The yard lights shifted. 2 floodlights rotated outward, sweeping the street beyond the gate and the storage unit line with brighter, wider arcs. They weren't searching randomly anymore. They were widening the net. Ridge leaned into Prez. He's probing. Prez's voice stayed low. He knows he lost the kid. He doesn't know where. That's why he's calm. Caden forced air into his lungs. He's not calm, he whispered. He's sure. Ridge gave him one sharp glance that said, yes. Exactly. A soft click in Prez's earpiece. Jax again, barely audible. West fence has an old service hatch, rusted lock. No camera on it, but it's inside light spill. We can breach quiet. Prez didn't move his body, only his eyes. How long? 2 minutes to open, 30 seconds to slip through. Prez breathed once, then spoke into the mic. Do it. Caden's heart started hammering again. He watched the west side of the fence line. Nothing happened at first. Then, very subtly, one of the fence panels near the far corner shifted as a figure worked at something low to the ground. Rourke's head turned slightly, like a dog catching a sound. Caden's breath stopped. But a truck engine inside the building revved, louder, and drowned any small noise from the fence. The roll-up door lifted again. The inside truck backed out a few feet, then stopped. Its bed was covered with a tarp strapped down tight, shapes underneath uneven, too long, too human. Caden's stomach heaved. He pressed a fist to his mouth. Rourke walked to the truck bed, grabbed the tarp edge, and checked the straps like he was inspecting cargo. Then, he tapped the side of the truck twice, a signal. The driver nodded. The roll-up door lifted higher and the truck rolled forward again, disappearing inside. Caden's voice came out thin. They're moving them through the building. Prez's eyes didn't leave the structure. Yeah, Bishop's voice in the earpiece sounded like it was being ripped from his throat. We go now. Prez didn't answer right away, because at the gate, a uniformed patrol car rolled up, legit this time, marked, lights off. 2 officers stepped out, spoke with Rourke, and nodded like they were being given an official briefing. Caden blinked hard. Cops, Ridge's jaw clenched. That's the point. Cover. Prez's voice dropped to a deadly calm. Rourke's got the right badges in his pocket. That means if we screw this up, they'll call it biker violence against city employees. Cal's voice cut in softly. There's a file, Rourke's payments. If you can get video of him at Belmont tonight with those trucks, it ties him to the schedule. Prez stared at the floodlit yard, then made the decision. Jax, he said into the mic, you get inside and get eyes, record everything. If you see people, if you see kids, mark location, no contact unless you have to. Copy. Prez turned to Ridge. You and Caden stay put until I call you. Caden's chest tightened. I want to help. Ridge didn't look at him. You already did. Don't make it worse. Caden swallowed his words. He hated being useless. He hated being the reason men were risking their lives. He hated that his name was suddenly currency. Across the yard, the service hatch area went still. Then a shadow slipped through. Then another. They vanished into the pump station's blind side like smoke. For 10 seconds, nothing changed. Then Cal's voice came through again, urgent but controlled. Movement on camera feeds I'm catching. Interior hallway. Someone just turned off a corridor camera. Bishop's voice was a tight whisper. They're hiding something. Caden's ears strained for anything. Footsteps, shouts, a crash. The pump swallowed everything. The storm swallowed the rest. A minute passed. 2. Rourke walked away from the gate and toward the main building entrance. He spoke to the uniformed officers again, then pointed down the road like he was assigning posts. The cops moved where he told them. Caden's hands shook. He's setting a perimeter. Ridge nodded once. He's expecting trouble, just not this kind. Then Jax's voice came in, low and tight, like he was speaking through clenched teeth. I'm inside. A beat. Found the holding room. Another beat, longer, and when Jax spoke again, his voice wasn't calm anymore. There are kids in here. Caden's vision tunneled. Bishop's voice cracked through the earpiece like a snapped cable. How many? Jax exhaled hard. I count at least 6, maybe more. They're sedated, and his voice dipped, rougher. I see a bracelet, red and black, same as Bishop's brother wears in that photo. Caden felt his knees soften. Ridge caught his shoulder automatically, steadying him. Prez's voice came out low and lethal. Where exactly, Jax? Basement level, Jax said. Concrete corridor, door marked electrical, authorized only. 2 guards, not uniforms, real muscle. And I heard a truck reverse down here 5 minutes ago. They're loading soon. Bishop didn't even try to hide the tremor in his voice. We can't wait. Prez stared at the floodlit building like he was measuring how much violence it would cost to save a single life. Then he spoke, quiet enough that it felt like a vow. All right. And at that exact moment, Rourke's head snapped toward the west side of the yard like he'd felt the word. He lifted his radio. And somewhere inside Belmont, a door slammed hard enough to cut through the pump hum. The door slam inside Belmont sounded like it had purpose. Rourke stopped mid-step in the floodlit yard, head tilted, radio already in his hand. The uniformed officers near the gate shifted their stance, suddenly alert, pretending they weren't taking orders from him while doing exactly that. Ridge's hand tightened on Caden's shoulder. Don't move, he whispered. Caden couldn't feel his fingers. He watched Rourke raise the radio and speak once, short. Inside the pump station, something changed. Lights flickered in a side corridor window, then steadied. A second later, a worker stepped out of the main entrance, jogged to the roll-up door area, and gestured urgently at the truck driver. The roll-up door lifted wider. The inside truck backed out, slow, careful, its bed still strapped under the tarp. It angled toward the yard like it was getting ready to leave. Caden's stomach turned again. He pictured bodies beneath that tarp and hated himself for picturing it. Jax's voice came through the earpiece, tight and clipped. They know. Guards just got a message. One moved to the corridor corner with a shotgun, others checking doors. Bishop's voice was raw. Can you reach them? No, Jax whispered. Doors heavy, electronic lock. I can hear breathing on the other side. Kids are out, sedated. If I force it, I lose stealth, and those guards will... He didn't finish. He didn't need to. Prez's voice cut in, calm but edged. Mark the lock model. Anything. Jax breathed once. Keypad's older. There's a panel above it. Looks like they're bypassing with a master. Also, there's a camera in the corner. It's been angled away. Someone's already tampered with it. Cal's voice slid in, quick. If it's an older keypad, there's a chance it's tied to the same control cabinet as the pump monitoring. You get me a photo, I might spoof it. Jax. I'll try. Rourke strode toward the roll-up door area now, speaking to the truck driver. He checked his watch, then pointed toward the gate, like he wanted that load out before dawn made it harder to explain. Prez watched him for one long second, then keyed his mic. Ridge, he said softly, bring Caden in. Ridge didn't argue. He didn't ask why. He just nodded once like the decision was already loaded into his bones. Caden's chest tightened. Inside? Not through the yard, Ridge murmured. We go through the service route. Caden wanted to say no. He wanted to stay small like they told him. But Jax's voice, there are kids in here, kept pounding in his head. Ridge pulled Caden along the back edge of the storage units, keeping them low, moving between pools of light. They passed a chain-link section where the fence met a concrete drainage channel. The channel ran dark and fast with storm water, a river in a ditch. Ridge stopped at a spot where the fence dipped behind stacked utility pipes. "This is where Jax got in," he said. "Service hatch." The hatch wasn't a hatch anymore. It was a mouth, a low-maintenance opening in the fence line, rusted and bent, just wide enough to squeeze through if you hated yourself. Ridge pushed first, then reached back for Caden's arm. Caden crawled through, scraping his elbow on metal. The fence caught his hoodie and tugged like it wanted to keep him. He yanked free and dropped onto wet gravel inside the yard. The floodlights made everything feel exposed. The hum of the pumps made everything feel muffled. Ridge stayed crouched and guided Caden behind a concrete barrier stacked with sandbags. From here, Caden could see the main entrance, the roll-up door, and the gate. The uniformed officers stood at the gate like sentries. One smoked with his back half turned. The other kept scanning the street. Rourke walked past them without even looking at their faces. Caden's throat tightened at how normal it all looked. Two city workers rolled a large wheeled bin across the yard, like trash, like tools, like nothing. The bin was the kind with a lid that locked. Ridge leaned close to Caden. "You see that bin?" Caden nodded. "That's how they move smaller things. Phones, IDs, evidence, maybe drugs, maybe—" Ridge stopped himself. "Keep your eyes down." At the roll-up door, Rourke stepped into the shadow of the building and disappeared from view. Caden felt his pulse spike. He went inside. Ridge listened to his earpiece. "Prez, he's in." Prez's voice. "I see it. Stay hidden." Seconds later, Jax came through again, voice barely air. "Rourke just entered basement stairwell. He's heading toward the holding corridor." Bishop's voice made a sound like pain. "He's checking them. Cal. Jax, I need that keypad, even a rough photo." Jax. "Working it." Caden stared at the main building. He wanted to rip the door open himself, like a stupid hero in a movie. But he wasn't a hero. He was a kid who'd slept behind machines and eaten out of paper bags. Ridge shifted to look around the barrier. "We need leverage." Caden blinked. "What kind?" Ridge's eyes stayed on the yard. "Something that makes Rourke stop acting like a cop and start acting like a criminal on record. We need his mask to slip." Caden swallowed. His mind flicked to the black ring, the painted square in his burned-out laundromat corner, the stolen notebook. "My notebook," Caden whispered. He took it. Ridge looked at him sharply. "The one with plates and times." Caden nodded. "And I wrote something else." Caden's mouth went dry. "I wrote where he parks sometimes, behind the closed pharmacy on Klein. There's a grate that leads into a tunnel. Kids crawl in there to sleep when it's cold." Ridge's eyes narrowed. "A tunnel into where?" Caden shook his head. "I don't know. It goes under the road. You can hear pumps when you crawl deep." Ridge's expression changed. He understood. "That tunnel could connect to Belmont," he murmured. Caden's throat tightened. "I didn't know. I heard the hum." Ridge keyed his mic. "Prez, kid knows a tunnel entrance off Klein behind the pharmacy. Could connect to Belmont or run under the channel." Prez's voice came back immediate. "That's our exit route if the yard goes hot." "Good." The roll-up door squealed again. The inside truck began to move. But it didn't head for the gate. It angled toward the back of the building, toward a lower loading ramp that dipped underground. Caden's stomach tightened. "They're loading from below," Ridge swore under his breath. "Basement ramp. That means they're moving the sedated kids straight into the truck without daylight seeing anything." Jax's voice came through, sudden and urgent. "Rourke's at the corridor. He's with the guards. He's saying, load the first two." Bishop's voice cracked. "No!" Prez's voice stayed controlled, but every word sharpened. "Jax, can you delay?" "I can try," Jax whispered. "But if I show myself—" "Don't," Prez snapped. "Not yet." Cal cut in, breathy. "Jax, I can spoof the lock if I get the keypad panel image. I'm close. I'm really close." Jax. "I have it." A quick rustle. "Sending now." Cal. "Got it. Give me—" A hard sound interrupted him through the comms. A shout in the distance, not inside. Outside. Caden turned his head just as one of the uniformed officers near the gate lifted his chin toward the storage units, toward the very line Caden and Ridge had crossed. The officer's hand moved to his radio. Ridge went still. The officer spoke, low, and the other officer's head snapped toward the yard. Then the first officer did something Caden had never seen a regular cop do when he thought he'd found something. He smiled. Rourke's voice blasted through a loudspeaker from inside the building, suddenly public, suddenly official. "This is Detective Rourke. Step out. Hand over the miner." Now. The yard froze in that one sentence. Ridge leaned into Caden's ear, breath hot and hard. "He's making it loud. He's trying to force us to move." Caden's throat closed. "He knows we're here." Ridge's eyes stayed locked on the gate where the officers were starting to walk, slow, toward the storage units. "No," Ridge murmured. "He knows we're near. He wants us to panic." From the basement ramp, the truck's reverse lights flashed on. Jax's voice came through, broken with urgency. "They're opening the holding door." Bishop's voice was barely human. "If they load them, we lose them." Prez's voice dropped to a knife-edge calm. "Ridge, Caden, get ready to move to the tunnel route." Ridge didn't hesitate. He grabbed Caden's sleeve, and as they shifted behind the barrier, Caden saw Rourke step into view at the top of the basement ramp, floodlight catching the black square ring on his finger. Rourke looked straight across the yard, not at the garage, not at the gate, at the exact spot Caden was hiding, and Rourke raised 2 fingers, pointing, quiet, precise, like he was placing a target. Rourke's 2 fingers stayed up for a beat, quiet, deliberate. Then he dropped his hand and spoke into his radio. The uniformed officers near the gate changed direction instantly. They weren't walking toward the storage units anymore. They were fanning out. One moved along the fence line with his hand low at his belt. The other cut across the yard, angling to get behind the sandbag barrier Caden and Ridge were using for cover. Ridge grabbed Caden's sleeve and hauled him down into a crouch, so low Caden's knees dug into gravel. "Tunnel route," Ridge whispered. "Now." Caden didn't ask where. He didn't ask how. He moved. They slid along the base of the concrete barrier, using the pump station's own shadows, timing their movement with the sweep of floodlights. Each time the light swung away, Ridge pulled Caden forward. Each time it swung back, they froze as if they were part of the ground. The hum of pumps swallowed the small sounds, breathing, wet fabric, gravel shifting. But not everything. A radio crackled close. "Contact near West Barrier. Check behind." Ridge's jaw tightened. He yanked Caden into a narrow gap between stacked utility pipes and a concrete wall that ran toward the drainage channel. Ahead, the channel dropped into a darker stretch where floodlights didn't fully reach. A maintenance access door sat low in the wall, painted the same dull green as the fence, half hidden behind weeds and water-stained concrete. Ridge tried the handle once. Locked. He pulled a small tool from his pocket and worked the lock without looking down, hands moving fast, practiced. Caden's heart slammed against his ribs. He could hear boots now, wet steps on gravel. Rourke's voice echoed faintly from near the basement ramp, louder than it needed to be, like he wanted witnesses. "You're obstructing an investigation. You're endangering minors. Step out." It was theater. Caden understood that now, not because he knew law, because he knew predators. Predators loved a story that made you the villain before they touched you. The lock clicked. Ridge pulled the door open just wide enough. "Through," he breathed. Caden slid into darkness. It wasn't a hallway. It was a tunnel mouth. Concrete, damp, narrow, the air thick with that same wrong smell Caden had warned them about. The hum of pumps was louder here, vibrating through the walls. Ridge slipped in behind him and pulled the door nearly shut, leaving a crack for air and sound. Through the crack, Caden saw floodlights sweep past, missing them by inches. A shadow moved outside, an officer's silhouette. The officer paused, head turning as if he'd felt the presence of something nearby. He took one step toward the maintenance door. Ridge's hand went to Caden's chest, holding him still like a clamp. The officer leaned closer. Then his radio crackled, and he turned his head away. "Unit 2, basement ramp, now." The silhouette moved off, boots splashing away. Ridge waited until the sound faded. Then he pushed the door shut fully. Darkness closed around them. Caden's breathing sounded too loud in the tunnel. He tried to quiet it, and couldn't. Ridge pressed a finger to his lips anyway, and started forward, one hand on the wall, feeling for changes. The tunnel angled downward, deeper under the yard, the air cooler and wetter. The ground was slick with runoff. Caden's shoes slipped twice, and Ridge caught his sleeve, keeping him upright without breaking stride. After a bend, the tunnel opened into a wider service corridor with pipes running overhead and a grated floor in places where water rushed beneath. The sound of the pumps became a constant roar, but it was contained now, like being inside the throat of the machine. Caden realized something with a sick, sharp clarity. This wasn't just an escape route. This was connected. Belmont's bones ran under the city, and drains were its veins. Ridge checked a sign stenciled on the wall, white letters half peeled. B-level access. He nodded once, grim. We're under them. A distant thump echoed down the corridor, heavy like a truck door slamming inside a concrete bay. Caden flinched. Then another sound layered over it, muffled voices, closer than they should have been. Ridge stopped, held up a hand. They listened. Through the roar of machinery, Caden could make out words in fragments, male voices, businesslike, fast. First two, strap 'em, don't wake. Caden's stomach clenched so hard he thought he might throw up. Ridge moved again, faster but quieter, guiding Caden toward a metal stairwell that rose to a door marked Electrical, Authorized Only. Caden froze. That's the door, he whispered. Jack said. I know, Ridge murmured. Ridge pressed his ear to the door, listened. Then he tapped his mic. Prez, he breathed. We're under. Corridors active. They're loading sedated kids from basement ramp. We're at the electrical door. Prez's voice came back in a low blast of controlled fury. Hold. Do not breach unless Cal gives the word. Cal's voice cut in instantly, intense. I'm in. I can pop the keypad for 10 seconds. 10. You get one shot. Ridge's eyes went hard. Do it. Cal. On 3. 1. 2. Caden's skin prickled. He stared at the door like it was alive. Cal. 3. A faint click sounded from the keypad outside the door, like a lock turning its mind. A green light blinked once. Ridge grabbed the handle and pulled. The door opened a few inches, then caught on an internal latch. Ridge cursed under his breath. He wedged his fingers into the gap and forced it wider, metal groaning quietly. Caden held his breath so hard his chest hurt. Ridge slipped through first. Caden followed. They entered a concrete corridor lit by a single buzzing fluorescent strip. The air was colder here. Cleaner, but in a way that felt wrong, like antiseptic covering rot. Halfway down the corridor was the door Jax had described. No window, thicker metal, keypad beside it, scuffed around the edges like it had been kicked before. Two men stood near it, not uniforms, big. Hands at their sides, shoulders squared, faces blank like they didn't need permission to hurt someone. One had a shotgun slung casually as if it was a broom. The men were turned away, focused on something farther down, the basement ramp area, where the truck was reversing again, deeper, louder. Ridge pulled Caden back into the shadow of a pipe chase. Stay, he whispered. Caden shook his head, panic making him brave and stupid. We can't. Ridge's eyes snapped to him. Stay. Caden stayed. Ridge's fingers moved on his mic. Jax, he breathed. Where are you? Jax's whisper came back immediately. Ceiling crawl above the holding room. I can see the guards. I can't see you, Ridge. We're behind pipe chase 10 feet from corridor door. Jax. If you breach, they'll shoot. A heavy rolling sound echoed, wheels on concrete, a dolly, a stretcher. Caden leaned a fraction forward and saw it, two workers pushing a wheeled gurney draped with a tarp. A limp shape underneath, small. Another gurney followed behind it, Caden's vision blurred with rage and fear. The guard stepped aside like it was routine, letting the gurneys pass toward the basement ramp. Ridge's jaw clenched so hard the tendon in his neck stood out. Cal's voice came through, urgent. Lock is going to reset. You have seconds before the keypad logs an anomaly. Prez's voice, cold and final. Jax, do you have a clean shot on a camera? We need Rourke on video ordering the load. Jax, yes, he's at the ramp now. I can capture audio. Bishop's voice cracked. Forget video. Get my brother. Prez, we do both or we lose everything. Caden's hands shook. He couldn't take it. He couldn't just watch. He leaned out one more inch to see the ramp, and there he was. Rourke stood at the base of the ramp, floodlights spilling down behind him. His coat was open now, badge visible on his belt like a shield. His black square ring flashed as he pointed at the gurneys and spoke like he was directing traffic. Load them, Rourke said clearly. Then bring the next. Jax's voice hissed in Caden's ear through the comms. Got it? Recorded. Rourke turned slightly, enough for Caden to see his face under the lights. And then Rourke's eyes shifted. Straight to the pipe chase, straight to Caden. Rourke's mouth didn't open in surprise. It curled, just barely, like he'd been waiting for this exact moment. He lifted his radio and spoke one word. Now, the guard with the shotgun snapped his head toward the shadows, and the barrel began to rise. The shotgun barrel rose out of the dim like a clock hand reaching the hour. Ridge moved before Caden's brain finished the fear. He slammed his forearm across Caden's chest and drove him back into the pipe chase, flattening him against cold concrete. A blast went off. Not aimed where Caden had been, aimed at the space his face occupied half a second earlier. The sound tore through the corridor so violently Caden's ears rang into pain. Concrete dust burst from the wall, spraying grit across Ridge's shoulder. Ridge didn't hesitate. He shoved Caden down hard, then pivoted and threw something, small, dark, down the corridor. It hit the floor and popped with a sharp crack. Light exploded white, a flashbang. For a heartbeat, everything turned to screaming brightness. The guards cursed, one stumbling back, hands flying to his eyes. The shotgun dipped. The second guard reached for his belt, blinking hard, trying to recover. Ridge hauled Caden up by the hoodie and ran him backward through the electrical door they'd slipped through, shoving him down the service corridor. "Move," Ridge hissed. "Don't look back." Caden's legs moved on pure panic. The tunnel floor slicked under his shoes, water splashing up his jeans. The pump roar swallowed everything except the echo of boots behind them. They hit the metal stairwell, half slid down it, then tore into the wider service passage. Ridge keyed his mic. "Prez, we're blown. They fired. They saw the kid." Prez's voice snapped back instantly. "Jax?" Jax's breathing came through hard. "I'm pinned above the holding room. Guards are moving. Rourke is yelling. He knows we're inside." Bishop's voice was a raw growl. "Where's my brother?" "Jax, still in the room. Doors open now. They're pulling gurneys out faster." Cal's voice cut in, frantic but focused. "I can trigger an alarm from the pump control panel, cause an evacuation protocol. It'll open certain safety doors and draw everyone topside." Prez answered without hesitation. "Do it." "Now, Cal. 30 seconds. Ridge stopped dead in the tunnel and pushed Caden into a shallow recess behind a pipe junction, then crouched in front of him like a shield. "You stay here," Ridge ordered. "No sound." Caden's throat clenched. "We can't leave them." Ridge's eyes burned. "We're not leaving them, but you are not dying in a sewer." A thud echoed overhead, heavy like a truck hitting the ramp. Another. Then voices came closer through the tunnel network, muffled but moving fast like men were repositioning. Ridge leaned into his mic. "Prez, we need a path to the holding room that isn't that corridor." Prez's voice came back low. "Klein Tunnel, pharmacy entrance. You told me it connects. You lead, Ridge." Ridge's jaw tightened. "We're already under. If we backtrack to that junction and take the east pipe run, we can surface near the old storm outlet behind the building. That's closer to the ramp." Prez. "Do it." Caden's heart hammered. "I can—" Ridge cut him off. "No." Then, as if the pump station heard the word and chose violence anyway, the entire complex changed. A siren wailed. Not a police siren, a facility alarm. Deep, metallic, industrial. Red lights flickered in the tunnel, reflecting off wet concrete. Somewhere above, loudspeakers crackled to life. "Warning, pressure anomaly. Clear the lower levels." Caden's stomach twisted. The alarm made everything feel bigger, worse, more official. Ridge's eyes lifted. Cal did it. Through the tunnel, boots thundered overhead, people moving, shouting now, sudden urgency. Ridge grabbed Caden's arm and yanked him out of the recess. "We move with the chaos. Stay tight." They ran deeper, following Ridge's memory of the tunnel branches, left at a graded floor section, right past a valve wheel, down a sloped channel where water ran faster. The siren kept screaming. The red lights kept pulsing. Caden's breath came in sharp knives. They reached a junction where the concrete widened into a maintenance chamber. A stenciled arrow pointed east runoff/outlet. Ridge shoved open a rusted service gate. It screeched, but the siren swallowed it whole. They pushed through and climbed a steep ladder that smelled like old river mud. At the top was a hatch. Ridge pressed his ear to it, listened, then he pushed. They emerged into a narrow concrete culvert behind Belmont's main building. Rain poured in through a grated opening above, drumming like 1,000 fingers. The culvert led toward the basement ramp area, hidden from the yard by concrete walls and equipment stacks. Ridge crouched, pointed. Ahead, through the rain, Caden saw the ramp. And he saw them. 2 city workers pushing a gurney down the ramp toward the truck. Another worker walked beside them with a clipboard, pretending paperwork made it clean. And there, Standing just to the side, half under cover from the floodlight, Rourke. He was barking orders now, irritated by the alarm, by the timing, by the fact his machine wasn't running perfectly. "Move," Rourke snapped. "Ignore the alarm. This is scheduled maintenance. Load them and go." Caden's throat tightened. He wanted to scream. He wanted to throw himself at the gurney and drag the kid off it. Ridge's voice was a whisper of steel. "Do not move." Rourke looked up suddenly, scanning as if he felt eyes, but he didn't see the culvert, because at that exact moment the yard erupted with engines. Motorcycles, not a few, a swarm. They poured up to the gate and beyond, loud enough to shake the metal fence. The floodlights swung. Men shouted. Someone yelled, "Who let them in?" The uniformed officers moved to intercept, but the bikes didn't rush the gate like a riot. They stopped. They lined up across the entry road in a solid, immovable wall. In the confusion, a second group of bikers slipped around the perimeter, using the alarm as cover, moving in the dark edges where the floodlights didn't quite reach. Prez's voice came through Ridge's earpiece, calm like a trigger being squeezed. "Ridge, you have eyes on the ramp?" Ridge pressed the mic. "Yes, Rourke's there. Truck's loading." Prez: "Good. Jack's got audio. Cal's recording too. Now we take one thing we can't afford to lose." Bishop's voice cracked in, desperate. "My brother?" Ridge's eyes went distant for 1 second, like he was calculating how to do something impossible. Then he turned to Caden. "I'm going to say this once," Ridge whispered. "You listen, you obey. You don't argue, you don't improvise. If you freeze, you die." Caden swallowed and nodded hard. Ridge pointed to a side door near the ramp, metal, half hidden, marked stair access. "When that truck door opens, there's a gap. You go to that stair door and wait. You do not go down. You do not touch anyone. You wait until I grab you." Caden's mouth went dry. "Why me?" Ridge's eyes didn't blink. "Because they know your face. They'll chase you first. And while they chase you, I get the door." Caden felt his stomach drop. "You're using me." Ridge's voice didn't soften. "I'm saving kids, including you. Now decide fast." Caden's hands shook. He hated it. He hated being bait. But he'd already been bait since the moment the storm drain spit out that vest. At least this time, the bait had a purpose. The truck at the bottom of the ramp shifted. A latch clicked. The rear door began to open. Ridge grabbed Caden's sleeve once, hard. "Go!" Caden burst from the culvert into the rain, sprinting low along the concrete wall toward the stair access door. He made it halfway before a shout ripped through the ramp area. "There! That's him!" Caden's blood went ice. Rourke turned and saw him, and Rourke didn't shout, "Stop!" He didn't call for backup like a cop. He smiled like a man who'd finally caught the right thread. "Bring him to me," Rourke said, and the men near the truck started running. Caden sprinted for the stair access door with rain slapping his face so hard it felt like gravel. Behind him, boots hit the ramp in a fast rhythm, 3, 4 men closing the distance. Their breathing cut through the pump alarm and the motorcycle roar outside. They weren't chasing like cops. They were chasing like workers on a deadline. Caden reached the door and yanked, locked. His heart jumped into his throat. He slammed his shoulder into it once. Pain shot down his arm. The door didn't move. "Open it!" someone barked behind him. Caden spun and ran along the ramp wall instead, staying tight to the concrete, looking for any gap, any handle, any place to slip. A hand grazed his hoodie. He tore free and kept moving. Rourke was walking up the ramp now, not running, letting his men do the dirty work. Floodlight caught his face fully. Calm eyes, that same small curl in his mouth. The black square ring flashed as he lifted his radio. "Don't break him," he said, voice carrying. "Just bring him." Caden's lungs burned. He saw the culvert opening ahead, the dark mouth Ridge had pushed him out of. He couldn't go back. He cut left instead, toward stacked equipment and a row of metal cabinets under an overhang. For half a second, he disappeared from the floodlight, and that half second felt like air. Then, a worker tackled him from the side. Caden hit concrete hard, shoulder first, breath exploding out of him. He tried to scramble, but a knee pinned his lower back. A rough hand twisted his arm behind him. Pain flared white. "Got him," the worker grunted. Caden's face pressed into wet concrete. He tasted rust and rainwater. He forced his head up just enough to see Rourke walking closer, coat swaying, boots clean despite the storm. He stopped a few feet away and crouched like he was getting down to talk to a stray dog. "You run fast," Rourke said softly. Caden tried to yank his arm free. It only tightened the grip and sent pain higher. Rourke's eyes didn't change. Relax. You're making this harder. Caden spat rainwater and grit. I didn't do anything. Rourke nodded slowly, as if that was the saddest part. You did one thing. He leaned in, voice dropping. You handed the wrong people a problem. Caden's jaw shook. They're kids. Rourke's mouth twitched like he almost smiled again. Their inventory. That word hit Caden harder than the concrete. Rourke rose, adjusted his coat, and looked toward the basement ramp where the truck waited with its rear door half open. Inside, straps hung like spider legs. Bring him down, Rourke said. The worker hauled Caden up by the hoodie and dragged him toward the ramp. Caden's feet slipped on wet concrete. He kicked, tried to twist, but the grip was too strong. Another man grabbed his other arm, and suddenly Caden was lifted between them, half carried, half dragged. As they reached the top of the ramp, the pump alarm shifted tone. Higher, more urgent. Red lights reflected off the wet walls in violent pulses. Below, the truck engine revved impatiently. Rourke followed behind them, still not hurried. He lifted his radio again. Status, he said. A voice answered. Gates blocked. Bikes lined up. Uniforms are holding. Rourke's eyes narrowed, irritated, not scared. Then we finish quick. Caden's throat tightened. He tried to look for ridge, for any sign, but the ramp walls and floodlight angles hid everything except what Rourke wanted visible. They reached the bottom. The truck loomed, dark and tall. The rear door was open now, the bed lined with black rubber mats. 2 gurneys sat inside already, tarp covered. The shapes underneath didn't move. Caden's stomach rolled. One of the men dragged him toward the tailgate. Caden dug his heels into the wet concrete and screamed anyway. The sound came out raw and cracked, swallowed almost instantly by pumps and engines and sirens. Rourke didn't react to the scream. He stepped closer and held up a hand. Wait. The men paused, keeping Caden bent forward, arms locked. Rourke reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small black notebook, swollen at the edges from moisture but still intact. Caden's notebook. He flipped it open and scanned the pages, then looked at Caden with almost polite interest. You've been writing things down, Rourke said. Plates, times, names. That's ambitious. Caden's eyes burned. Give it back, Rourke chuckled quietly. No. He closed the notebook and tapped it against his palm. You want to know what you did wrong, Caden? Caden's chest heaved. You thought being careful makes you safe, Rourke said. Careful just makes you useful. He leaned in close enough that Caden could smell clean cologne under the rain and the industrial stink. You're going to tell me who else has seen that vest, Rourke whispered. You're going to tell me where they are. And if you lie, he paused, eyes calm, you'll ride out in the truck with the rest. Caden's vision blurred. He hated that fear made tears rise. He blinked hard and forced his voice out. I don't know. Rourke studied him like he was reading a document. Then he straightened, sighing as if Caden was disappointing. Load him, he said. The men lifted Caden again. And then the world detonated. A motorcycle engine screamed down the ramp, full throttle, insane in that narrow concrete space. Headlight flared like a comet. The bike slid sideways at the bottom, tires spitting water, and the rider kicked it upright in one fluid motion. It wasn't random. It was precise. The bike's front wheel slammed into the first man's knee. Bone popped loud. The man folded with a howl and released Caden's arm. Caden stumbled, half falling, then a hand caught his hoodie from behind and yanked him backward out of the truck's shadow. Ridge. Ridge dragged him into the tight space between a concrete pillar and a pump control cabinet. Ridge's face was wet, eyes cold, breathing hard. Down, Ridge snapped. Caden dropped, shaking. The biker who'd come down the ramp didn't stop. He planted his feet and swung a heavy chain, low, controlled, smashing the second man's wrist before he could reach for a weapon. The man screamed and backed away. Rourke took one step back, hand going inside his coat. Bishop appeared from the side corridor like a storm given a body. He didn't shout. He didn't hesitate. He drove into the group near the truck with brutal purpose, fists and shoulders clearing space. Jax dropped down from above, landing hard, rolling, coming up with a stolen radio in his hand. Chaos filled the ramp, but it wasn't sloppy chaos. It was planned chaos. The pumps and alarms covered the noise. The ramp walls blocked outside witnesses. And the club had chosen this battleground. Rourke's hand came out with a gun. Caden saw it clearly, black against the red pulsing light. Rourke aimed not at the bikers, at Caden. Ridge saw it too. Ridge shoved Caden sideways behind the control cabinet at the exact moment the gun barked. The shot cracked and slammed into metal, sparks spitting. Caden flinched so hard his whole body locked. Ridge grabbed the cabinet door handle and ripped it open, exposing a tangle of wires and switches. "Cal!" Ridge barked into his mic. "Kill the ramp lights!" A beat, then the floodlights above the ramp snapped off. Darkness swallowed the space, leaving only red emergency strobes and the glowing dots of equipment panels. In the strobe light, figures became flashes, Bishop moving like a battering ram, the biker with the chain sweeping low, Jax dragging something heavy from the corridor, someone on a gurney. Caden's eyes adjusted just enough to see the tarp lift, a pale face under it, not dead, drugged, small. Ridge's voice slammed Caden back into motion. "Move when I move. Don't let go of my jacket." Caden grabbed Ridge's leather sleeve with both hands like it was a lifeline. Ridge yanked him up, and they sprinted along the ramp wall toward the side corridor, using the darkness and strobes. Behind them, Rourke shouted, furious now, not calm. "Shoot them!" A shotgun blast boomed somewhere in the dark. Pellets pinged off concrete like hail. Bishop's voice roared back raw. "Get the kids out!" Jax dragged the gurney into the side corridor and shoved it toward another biker waiting at the stairwell. Caden ran, half blind, following Ridge's body as the only reliable shape in the strobe light. They reached the corridor corner, and Ridge stopped so suddenly Caden nearly slammed into him, because at the corridor entrance stood the uniformed officers from the gate, guns out, faces hard, blocking the exit route. For a heartbeat, everyone froze in the red pulse. The officers didn't look confused. They looked ready. Rourke's voice cut through the dark behind them, close and vicious. "Now," he said, "make it clean." Ridge's grip tightened around Caden's wrist, and Caden realized the worst part wasn't that Rourke was corrupt. It was that he wasn't alone. The uniformed officers held the corridor like a wall, 2 pistols up, elbows locked, faces set in that blank official expression Caden had learned to fear more than anger. Red emergency strobes pulsed across their badges, across their hands, across the concrete. Every flash made the scene look like a series of photographs. Ridge's shoulders squared in front of Caden, Bishop's silhouette down the ramp, Jax half bent over a gurney, the biker with the chain braced like a guard dog. Rourke stepped into the strobe light behind them, gun still in his hand, ring catching every pulse. "Drop the kid," he said. "Step away. You walk out, you keep breathing." One officer's eyes flicked to Caden like he was a piece of evidence, not a child. Ridge didn't move. His voice came out low and even. "You're aiming at a minor." The officer on the left didn't answer Ridge. He answered Rourke. "We good to proceed?" Rourke's mouth curled, just barely. "Make it clean." Caden felt his body go cold, not fear, clarity. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't someone overstepping. This was planned, rehearsed, protected. Ridge's hand tightened on Caden's wrist, then loosened, one quick squeeze like a signal. "Caden," Ridge breathed, barely audible. "When I move, you move. Don't look at the guns, look at the floor. Run where I pull you." Caden swallowed hard and nodded once. Tiny. Bishop's voice roared from down the ramp, raw with fury. "You're done, Rourke!" Rourke didn't even look at him. He kept his eyes on Caden as if that was the only thing that mattered. The officer on the right took a half step forward, lining up a shot, and then Cal's voice came through Ridge's earpiece, calm in a way that didn't fit the moment. "Prez, patch is live." Prez's answer was immediate. "Do it." For one heartbeat, nothing happened. Then, every overhead speaker in Belmont crackled, not with an alarm tone this time, but with a recorded voice, clear, sharp, and impossible to ignore. Rourke's voice. "Load them, then bring the next." Another crackle, another clip. "Their inventory!" Caden's stomach dropped. Even in the chaos, hearing those words again, broadcast, felt like the world finally hearing the truth. The speakers kept going. "Ignore the alarm. This is scheduled maintenance." The corridor officers froze, just for a fraction, because the sound didn't belong in their plan. It wasn't supposed to be public. It wasn't supposed to exist outside this concrete throat. Rourke's face changed for the first time all night, anger cracking through the calm. "Shut that off," he snapped. One officer glanced up toward the ceiling speakers instinctively, like he expected someone to rip them out by hand. That glance was the gap. Ridge moved. He yanked Caden sideways and slammed his shoulder into the corridor wall, dragging him into a narrow maintenance recess as the first officer fired. The bullet sparked off concrete where Caden's head had been. Ridge didn't stop. He threw his weight forward, driving into the officer's gun arm, forcing it up. A second shot cracked into the ceiling. The other officer reacted fast, swinging his pistol toward Ridge. Bishop hit him like a truck. Bishop came in from the ramp side, shoulder first, taking the officer into the wall hard enough that the badge on the man's chest clanged. The pistol skittered across the wet floor and vanished into the strobe darkness. Jax shouted from behind, "Gurney, move!" The biker with the chain snapped the chain out low, not to break bones this time, just to hook the fallen gun and yank it away from any reaching hand. Rourke raised his weapon again, eyes wild now, not controlled, not careful. He aimed. Prez appeared at the ramp mouth, calm, dry-eyed, terrifyingly steady. He didn't rush. He simply stepped into view where cameras could catch him, and he spoke loud enough to cut through the roar and strobes. "Detective Rourke, major crimes, currently shooting at a child." His words weren't just for the room. They were for every mic, every speaker, every recording Cal had running. Rourke flinched, the smallest flicker of hesitation, like he realized the stage had changed. The moment had witnesses now. Bishop grabbed the first officer by the collar and slammed him against the wall, pinning him. "You still want clean?" Bishop snarled. "You're on tape." The officer's eyes darted, finally afraid. Not of the bikers, of consequence. Rourke barked, "Move!" But his people were no longer moving like a machine. The broadcast had jammed the gears. The fake routine had cracked. Ridge dragged Caden toward the stairwell as Jax and two others pushed the gurney into motion. The wheels rattled over the concrete, fast, urgent. Caden ran with Ridge's jacket clenched in both hands, head down like he'd been told, feet splashing through shallow runoff. Behind them, Rourke lunged after them. Prez stepped into his path. No dramatic punch, no wrestling match, just an immovable presence. Rourke tried to angle around him, gun still up. Prez grabbed the barrel with one hand and shoved it toward the wall. The shot went off, sparks and dust and noise, but no body dropped. Prez's other hand drove into Rourke's wrist. The gun clattered away. Rourke's face twisted. He swung at Prez, wild now. Prez ate the hit and didn't fold. He grabbed Rourke's coat and shoved him backward into the ramp light, into view, into every lens. Jax yelled, "Kids first!" The gurney rolled up the stairwell, guided by two bikers, careful not to bounce the drug child's head. Another gurney followed, then another, pulled from the shadows by men moving like their lives depended on not making a mistake. Because they did. Caden's lungs burned as he and Ridge reached the upper level and burst into the yard. The floodlights were still off, but emergency lights painted the wet concrete red and orange. The gate area was chaos now. Bikes lined up, engines rumbling, riders standing beside them like a silent army. And beyond the gate, on the public street, real sirens approached. Too many, too late, but real. The recording had done what fists couldn't. It called in the right kind of attention. Ridge shoved Caden behind a stack of sandbags near the fence and crouched in front of him again. "Stay." Caden couldn't stop shaking. Did we? Ridge's eyes didn't leave the yard. "We got them out." From the stairwell, Jax emerged, drenched in sweat and rain, pushing another gurney. His face was wrecked with adrenaline, but his hands stayed steady. Bishop came up behind him, carrying someone, not a small child this time. A grown man, limp, heavier, wrapped in a tarp. The red and black braided bracelet hung loose at the man's wrist. Bishop's breath hitched like he'd been stabbed. He laid the man down gently, hands shaking now that the fight was leaving his body. "Drew," Bishop whispered, voice breaking. Hey, stay with me." The man's eyelids fluttered, barely alive. Bishop made a sound that wasn't a sob, wasn't a laugh, something in between that had nowhere else to go. Caden pressed a fist to his mouth, eyes burning. The approaching sirens grew louder. Blue and red lights flashed against the fence outside the gate now. Real units, too many to keep pretending. Rourke stumbled into the yard at the top of the ramp, coat torn, face slick with rain and fury. He saw the gurneys. He saw the kids being moved. He saw the street filling with law enforcement, and for the first time, his confidence slipped into something uglier. He shouted toward the officers, "Secure the scene! These men—" Cal's broadcast cut through again, louder, crueler. "Their inventory." Rourke's face went pale. A federal-looking SUV rolled up behind the marked cars, and men in plain dark jackets stepped out fast. One raised a hand, barking orders that the local uniforms obeyed instantly. Rourke started to back away. Two agents moved on him like they'd been waiting for a reason. "Detective Rourke?" one called. Rourke tried to square his shoulders, tried to put the badge back on his face. "What the hell is this?" The agent held up a device, recording audio still playing faintly. "It's you, on record, at a city facility, coordinating illegal transport of sedated minors." Rourke's jaw tightened. "You don't understand." The agent cut him off. "Hands!" Rourke's eyes flicked to Caden across the yard, like the kid was the loose end he still wanted to tie off. But now he couldn't reach him. Now the whole yard was full of eyes. Rourke's hands went up slowly. The black square ring caught the floodlight one last time as cuffs snapped on. Caden's knees went weak with delayed shock. Ridge caught him before he dropped. "You did good," Ridge said quietly. Not soft, not emotional, just a fact. Caden's voice came out small. "I just brought it back," Ridge nodded. And that was enough to break the machine. The days after didn't feel like a victory at first. They felt like paperwork and questions in bright rooms and strangers with badges who finally asked Caden his name like it mattered. Social workers that showed up with actual files. Doctors checking bruises and burns from the laundromat fire. A woman who spoke gently and didn't lie about how long things would take. Caden gave his statement twice, then a third time, because adults always needed it said again in a different room. The vest was photographed, bagged, tagged. Evidence now. The flash drive became a chain of arrests, contractor supervisors, city services men with fake badges, a supervisor who signed off on midnight work orders, and cops who'd been helping for years. Belmont Pumping Station got locked down. Excavations started around drain junctions listed on Cal's files. Phones, IDs, and things Caden couldn't stand to look at came up out of the mud. Some kids were found alive in places nobody wanted to believe existed. Some weren't. Bishop stayed by his brother's hospital bed until Drew could open his eyes and squeeze a hand. When Drew finally whispered, "You came," Bishop put his forehead against the mattress and didn't speak for a long time. Caden was placed in a temporary home first. Clean bed, real shower, food that didn't come wrapped in fear. He slept badly for nights because silence felt like a trap. On the fifth morning, the sky was clear for the first time since the storm. Someone knocked on the shelter door, not a command knock, a respectful one. Caden opened it and froze. The street outside was lined with motorcycles, not a few, hundreds. They stretched down the block in two long columns, chrome catching the dawn light, engines off. Riders stood beside their bikes in silence, helmets under arms, faces forward. Caden's throat tightened so hard he couldn't breathe. Ridge stood at the front with Prez and Bishop, all three of them still, serious, like this wasn't a show. It was a statement. Caden looked down the line and saw it kept going and going until the bikes disappeared around the corner. He swallowed. How many? Prez stepped forward and held out the biker vest, cleaned now, dried, stitched back where it had been cut. The patches looked darker in the morning light, heavier with meaning. 312, Prez said. Counted twice. Caden's hands trembled as he took the vest. It didn't feel like power. It felt like weight, like proof. Bishop glanced back at the line of bikes, then down at Caden. His voice was rough but steady. "You were invisible to this city," he said. "Not anymore." Caden blinked hard. I don't want trouble." Prez nodded once. "This isn't trouble." He looked at the riders, then back to Caden. "It's witness." Caden stood in the doorway holding the vest while dawn warmed the street. No engines, no intimidation, just presence. Hundreds of people choosing openly to be seen standing for one kid who did the right thing. Caden's voice came out thin. "Why?" Ridge answered him, simple, blunt. "Because you returned what wasn't yours when nobody would have blamed you for keeping it." Caden stared down the street at the silent wall of Harleys, at men and women who looked like the kind of people the city never accused of being soft. And he realized something he'd never felt before. Protection that didn't come with a price. Prez lifted two fingers in a small gesture, and engines started one by one, low, respectful, like thunder far away. The sound rolled down the block, not aggressive, not wild. A salute. Caden stood there until the last bike turned the corner and the street was just a street again. He looked down at the vest in his hands, then at the clean morning light, and felt the sharp edge of the old life finally start to dull. Not gone, but no longer the only thing. The door behind him stayed open.